Day one of the cross div saw a lot of brand new rosters with very minimal practice. So which rosters would look good and which were we completely correct about? That and more from the day one recap of week number 11 coming up right now. What's up, Call of Duty fans? Welcome back. IHOLDSHIFT with you guys, and we had a day today full of games that we honestly thought would go a little bit one-sided in some of them, and some that we may have depicted of going the distance that maybe didn't. Let's go ahead and start things off. If it's your first time to this channel, it's good to have you. Welcome. It's good to be here. We are 100 subs away from 10K. Gonna leave that out there. Do with it what you will. Subscribe. But let's dig into what we had to talk about today. Monday, June 24th, day numero uno. We saw the start of it, going to be UYU going up against units. And I have caved, and I will be doing the graphics for units to just without having a logo. It just is what it is. Luminosity would go up against Enigma 6 in the battle of essentially two-man swaps for both of those teams. And then we get a first look at Splyce with Huke, and would they be able to do any work versus FaZe Clan? And then to finish off the day, Evil Geniuses off their swap up from Phantoms will be going up against the champs of 100 Thieves. So let's start things off with UYU and units. Honestly, this one was just about as ugly as it may have seemed. I had these two teams at 16th and 15th in my power rankings, and it just honestly looked like some of these players have never played their specialists before. Specialist usage was awful throughout the entirety of the set. It would start on hardpoint C side, and it's honestly was some of the sloppiest hardpoint that we've seen since right around the time of Vegas. UYU, though, I will say, technically outslayed units. The downside was they could not hold a hill to save their lives. The specialists were atrocious. It was real bad. But then it would still come down to one final hill as UYU were able to get the early rotation from P2 to P3, or the courtyard to the fountain, forcing units to have to break in order if they wanted to hold their lead that they previously had. Well, they would do that. It was a 250 to 242. The S&D Arsenal would come up next, and honestly, again, there's a lot of consideration as far as these rosters being new. However, you have to keep in mind that units was mostly comprised of players that played on Team Sween and is an all-EU unit. I thought for sure that they would be able to find a lot of their success in the search and destroy. It was still very sloppy, both teams essentially just running at one another, but at least there were some incredible sniping moments that built some faith, I think, for both teams as far as what they can lean on for their search and destroy. The downside was there were multiple players still sitting at 0-4 after 5 rounds. For both teams, that is no bueno. It would end up going UYU's way, so we would go to a map number 3, Control on Arsenal. And honestly, at this point, I was sitting here in my room just laughing, just verbally and out loud just laughing because it was bad. Sloppy, awful specialists, streaks were finding team kills, shaky shots. Just don't go back and rewatch this one, honestly. Watch this 1 minute that I'll put up for you guys, and that's really all about you need to know. This would go all the way to round number 5, as units would go up 2-0 on this set, but would use a lot of specialists to try to close out the third. They would not quite be able to do it. UYU would bounce back and take the 4th round with their specialists, and then units would finally be able to close things off. So we'll be up 2-1 for units over UYU. Going to Arsenal again, but this time for hardpoint. Method started off 0-5. Phantom started off 0-4. Classic started off 1-5. Chalk it. You honestly cannot tell me that this roster of UYU is better than the old one. There's just no way. Granted, okay, they don't have any time playing with one another, but I don't get it. This one would go 250 to 115. Units would win this one 3-1. You're welcome if you bet that one because you won it if you bet the spread bet like I told you to for plus 175. That was awesome if you put money on that one. So congratulations if you're somebody out there who did bet that. Going to our second set, though, we'll take a look at Luminosity going up against Enigma 6. Kismet started off absolutely red-hot fire on frequency for the hardpoint. In general, would also be mixing it up with the KN, and Enigma 6 looked really strong through the first couple of hills. Vision Pulse was ready after the first rotation for Kismet. You thought it would be just about done there. Breezy would play well, Mayhem would play well, John and Slacked had super slow starts. It was 7-13 and 7-14 for each of them after the first rotation. However, Luminosity finally believing in the young talent in the CWL. Skies and Brack carried Luminosity throughout the entirety of the day. Kismet was essentially brought to a dead stop after his monster first rotation, only finding essentially 3 kills through the next 3 hills. And Luminosity would build too much of a lead as they came back and then would run away with this one 250 to 180. Going to the Search and Destroy, that would be played on Arsenal. Very back and forth, and this is where this matchup, I think, would honestly, you take a look at it in the future, both of these teams, I think, showed some things that would give a lot of top teams some potential troubles. Back and forth it would go, but E6 had a couple of strung together rounds in the middle portion of the map, ending up earning a lightning strike that would play the difference maker late. This would go 6-4 for E6. It would go back to frequency for control. Again, a very even match. LG's SOG line, though, started to play a touch better, and that was going to be the only thing that LG really needed to really start running away with this one versus E6. Gave them a pretty big advantage. Brack still absolutely playing out of his mind. Potential MVP candidate, I would say, if Luminosity ends up doing very well. 3-1 rather, was the control on frequency. We would go then to the 4th map, Luminosity up 2 maps to 1. And Enigma 6, they did this at Anaheim, would do it again here. General came out with the GKS to start. And even though he only finds 1 kill, it seems to be a very interesting strat. Just faster rate of fire, long barrel makes it essentially an ICR component, but it just kind of feels like, but why? But regardless, he pulls it off, and E6 comes off for a hot start. Then past that, after the first couple of hills would go to E6 way, LG would find a handful of team wipes, and LG would then build an insurmountable lead near the end, 250 to 196. LG take the set 3-1. But I will say that Enigma 6 can beat this Luminosity team with this roster. They need some work to get together and really figure things out, but there is potential for this roster to still be as good as the old roster. At the end of the day, it just comes down to, were the changes worth it? You finished top 6 at Anaheim. Do you really think that if you didn't get more time with that team, they could not have potentially been a top 4 performer? They actually were 1 win away from being a top 3 finisher. Question marks. I'm not 100% sure if I agree with the changes at the end of the day, but Enigma 6 still, I think, will be a contender if you give them some time. We'll get on to Splyce versus FaZe. The first time we will see Huke with this Splyce roster, expectations were high, and honestly, this entire set was very, very close. We'd start off on Gridlock Hardpoint, and it would be very, very close. Splyce were just a touch late on their rotations compared to that of FaZe. Again, one of the best respawn teams that we have currently in the CWL, next to, I would say, 100 Thieves, and then Optic also in the mix. But Huke was looking very, very good, taking a couple of multi-kills for his life, and it just goes to show that I think, and this is the big storyline that I had for this Splyce team, it wasn't just a one-person issue. Splyce has things to work on besides just making a single change for a monster player. So it would, in fact, be a superb showing for Huke, but not enough to take down FaZe Clan 250 to 238. Search and Destroy, Arsenal would be up next. Again, rather back and forth. But, again, Splyce have a lot of work to do in every single mode, not just finding a substitute to kind of get into the mix and be immediately better. FaZe was just more prepared. They would be able to find themselves enough with Zero really kind of popping off this one, finding streaks pretty early on and to punish with it. It was just too many obstacles for Splyce to overcome a 6-3. But hold your horses. We'd go to Control next on frequency. It would go all the way to round 5. Splyce nearly tossed this one away as they threw a number of really poor specialists out in round number 4, but they were able to clutch up, take round number 4, send it to round number 5, where they were once again able to come back after a life deficit and clinch things up. A 3-2, but a very, very close round, and Splyce finding a handful of clutch moments like that one there, where they were able to just narrowly stay in. So taking a respawn off of FaZe Clan, and you started to feel the momentum shift a little bit with everyone starting to pop off a touch. We'd go to Hardpoint on C side. FaZe would start off high and mighty, but Splyce would try to fight things back. A seam really did pop off here for FaZe Clan as the entry SOG found a number of openings that really should not have been made available to him. But at the end of the day, he was one of the only ones that were really starting to play super, super solid. Splyce were able to string together a handful of hills in the middle of the 3rd rotation, especially finding a fountain break, which turned into nearly a full hill at the fountain, but also nearly a full hill at the barrels. They were able to find essentially about 100 points for free. They would come back and take this one at the score of 250 to 193. So now 2 respawns off of FaZe Clan, who again has been very good at respawn. We'd send things to a Search and Destroy. It would start off very neck and neck. FaZe Clan able to string together a couple rounds here and there. And honestly, it just became a little bit too much for Splyce to handle. Again, just the preparation. Another 6-3. But goodness, did we learn a lot about this Splyce squad. And honestly, I think that there's a lot of promise here. Obviously, taking FaZe Clan to Game 5, your first game out without having much practice is great, but there are more things to work on for Splyce rather than just sitting here and saying Huke's going to carry us to more victories, because that was not the only issue that Splyce had previously, and currently, as you saw it in this one, it's not the only issue that Splyce currently has. So, a lot of things to work on for Splyce. We'd finish off the day with Evil Geniuses taking on 100 Thieves. I had this one slated to go a 3-0. After I had seen the Splyce victory, I actually put down a little parlay bet guessing all 4 games, and I was about to be right. And actually, for a second there, I just kind of kicked my feet back and said, all right, 100 Thieves, they got this. Attach had other things in mind, as Evil Geniuses would come right out of the gate looking like hot fire, finding themselves a very quick hard point, 250 to 199. It was back and forth through a lot of it, but again, Tatch was just not being turned aside. That same fire would turn over into the search and destroy, which Evil Geniuses would also be able to take at a 6-3 score. And you start to wonder, you start to think, especially considering where those maps were played. It was Arsenal hardpoint first, and then Gridlock search and destroy second. Both maps that have been relatively successful areas for 100 Thieves on both those modes. So you start to wonder, would this potentially be a 3-0 the opposite way? I started to get a little panicky, but 100 Thieves, they would make me hold on to my desk a little bit harder on the Gridlock control. It would go all the way to round 5, and really Kenny is just not really performing all that well for these first 3 maps. Somehow, some way, 100 Thieves able to manage to find the round 5 window, sending it to a Game 4. And almost as like the Splyce that you kind of felt 100 Thieves were waking up. And that was the case as we'd go to Gridlock for the hard point, one of 100 Thieves' best, although really none of the maps are terrible, but they're sitting at an 8-1 on this map in specific with a pretty hefty average. They would find success here against Evil Geniuses, shutting down Attach 250 to 181. We would go to map number 5. Would the reverse sweep happen? It would be frequency. Search and destroy would go all the way to round 11, and Evil Geniuses are able to clinch things up against 100 Thieves, who had some concerns over their search and destroy. They went 6-1 at Anaheim. They go 0-2 in search and destroy versus Evil Geniuses here. They ruin and essentially make my day relatively expensive, simply because I had a lot of money riding on that parlay in specific, and well, it was a downgrade for 100 Thieves as they would be made real again. Evil Geniuses, though, definitely looked strong throughout. Nearly made this a 3-0 against 100 Thieves. That would have been impressive, but still sticking around in the second hard point and being able to take it to them in the search and destroy all the way to round 11. Really, really impressive stuff. Big kudos to Evil Geniuses, looking a lot more solid with the one little sub off. Again, Phantoms wasn't playing too terribly, but you have to trust what Revan does, and that's find a team that can win and that he can coach. Clearly, he got that. Going over to what the games look like for Tuesday, we need to break those down very quickly because we got a lot of games to go over. We've got UIU Enigma 6, Units and Luminosity, 100 Thieves and FaZe Clan, and then Evil Geniuses and Splyce. And we're going to dig through the head-to-head very quickly. I did change up these graphics coming up, but I want to know your reactions to this screen. When the numbers are all up, would you guys rather see just individual day scores so the graphics could be bigger? I would be happy to do that if that's what you guys want to see. Let me know in the comments what you think about this graphic page with the weekly breakdown. Let's go ahead and take a look at UIU versus Enigma 6. Again, UIU just looked atrocious, honestly. A lot of just really bad specialist usage. No one was really playing all that well. Blast had a couple of moments. Class looked pretty awful. He was playing mostly on an SMG with Ruin. It just didn't look very good. And for Enigma 6, I think there's a lot of potential here. Some sloppy moments to be sure, but honestly, it just feels like this team has more going for them. GodRx in general in the backline did look good throughout the day. Kismet still played very well, and Breezy and Mayhem both had some individual moments. So take a look at this one because honestly, I've got some pretty high favor going to Enigma 6. Our next game coming up will be Luminosity versus Units, and for Luminosity, you got to feel really good about getting the 3-1 versus Enigma 6 in what was a competitive series, but going up against the squad of Units, you got to be feeling even better about getting more reps in, I think, for this squad. Brack and Skies are nuts. Flat out, those two alone could really just do it all by themselves, but they also have Formal, who's been playing very well, and when Slacked and John play even just remotely okay, this team is going to be a top competitor, I think, when it comes down to what might happen at Miami. Again, they are out of the running for a top 4 spot as far as the divisional standings go, but they could still potentially make it to the play-in bracket. It would be a difficult run. For Units, I liked what I saw, kind of, from Cammy and Weeman and Nolson, but again, a lot of very sloppy moments. Personally, I think this one's going to be a pretty easy one for Luminosity. Moving on forward to the back half of the day where things will get interesting. 100 Thieves and FaZe Clan, these two teams have never actually played up against one another in an actual head-to-head. Last time these two teams met were when FaZe Clan were Red Reserve, so again, you take that with what you will, but not really much going in favor for them, obviously, with that swap. So, for the rest of this squad, what do you do if you're looking at this from the perspective of 100 Thieves? Will you be able to bounce back? FaZe Clan went all the way to 5 with Splyce. You have to be a little bit worried about that, especially considering how narrow their win on Gridlock was. A 250 to 238 win was very, very close. They did look very good in the Search and Destroy. That's my concerns for 100 Thieves, is do they have enough reps and enough work to make sure that they're solid in Search? Yes, a lot of these teams are looking at it as practice reps for Miami and in the future for Worlds, but this matchup, I think both teams take very, very seriously because it is a lot riding on the fact that these teams have never played each other before, and it's two top 4 squads going up against one another. And then how about this? With Evil Geniuses beating 100 Thieves, they'll be going up against Splyce, who are able to take FaZe Clan to game number 5. So 2 game 5 winners, or probably at least 2 game 5 participants in the first day since they're swaps. And honestly, this one's going to be a very close one as well. I have a little bit of favor going one way, and we'll find out what that way is here in just a moment. But again, you have to be feeling really good about Evil Geniuses, able to find the 2 Search and Destroy wins. That's where Splyce has been a little bit more on the weak side. You see it there. They were on 0-2. In their game 5s, they were able to find some more success, though, in the control, which is important because previously this team, not a very good control team, but I am a little bit worried about Evil Geniuses and their control because they've been essentially a one-trick when it comes down to them performing on Arsenal before in the Divisional and then at Seaside when they played at Anaheim. So let's go ahead and go over to the bookie's worst nightmare. That's our next thing up for you guys. And again, if you're looking for betting tips, there's a lot of places that you guys can bet. Personally, I bet on Bovada because I'm from North America and there's nowhere else to bet in North America, but there's tons of EU sites out there. So let's take a look at my scorecard first of how we did on Monday with my advice and what I was trying to bet. Units, the minus 1.5 versus UIU. Hope you're glad that you bet that one at plus 175. You won it. And then the parlay bet that I had with FaZe Clan and 100 Thieves. Unfortunately, that round 11 really broke a lot of hearts, I think, and mine was in there included, so that one did not quite pay off. Let's go ahead and take a look, though, what we're going to be dealing with. UIU versus Enigma 6 first. And again, you take a look at the last 10. I'm going to be doing just references and stats for when these rosters were changed. So if they've changed at least 2 players, I will be subbing in different statistics. That was actually the same case with our previous screens. Personally, on this one, UIU coming in as the heavy underdog, plus 275. It feels pretty tempting, even the plus 120 on the spread. But honestly, Enigma 6 just look cleaner in just the core raw mechanics of the game. Flat out, I've got Enigma 6 winning this one 3-1. Not much to talk about. Honestly, though, as far as what you might want to bet on this one, I would maybe consider doing Enigma 6 as a parlay option because there's not a lot of great bets coming in for day 2's games. Our second set of the game will be Luminosity versus Units. Copy-paste the conversation essentially from what we just had with Enigma 6 and UIU to this matchup. Luminosity, again, heavy favorites at minus 400, minus 163 on the spread. Heavy underdogs are Units at plus 275, plus 120 on the spread. Honestly, there's not much for you to do here, but to take Luminosity as a parlay with Enigma 6, I've got this one also going 3-1. I don't feel super confident in either team finding a clean 3-0 because both of these teams are a little wonky, but I can't really see these games going to Game 5, let alone there be an upset for either UIU or Units against these two teams. So that's why I have parlay bets in place for both Enigma 6 and Luminosity and nothing else. Nothing else is really worth betting, to be completely frank. Going to the back half of the day, this is where things become very interesting. FaZe Clan going up against 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves will be the favorites here at minus 250 for them and minus 110 for them to find a 3-1 or a 3-0. I don't know about that one there, betting lines, because FaZe Clan looked very good, and at the plus 175, that's a tempting offer if they could potentially find some upset against 100 Thieves, who just previously looked weak in the Search and Destroy. Well, I will tell you flat out that the only thing really worth looking at here is the plus 1.5 spread for FaZe at minus 125 because I've got this one going to Game 5, but I do have 100 Thieves winning it 3-2. But if you're feeling feisty, you don't necessarily agree with what I had to say about 100 Thieves and them being able to bounce back because I think they will. I think they'll wake up and play with a fire against FaZe Clan. Honestly, there's some good potential for upsets here, which is why I have it listed as an upset potential. If you're feeling feisty for that plus 175, you might want to step there. But honestly, I feel better about that spread bet. Minus 125 is not a terrible line for this one because I see this one, like I mentioned, going to 5. So if you're out there, you want it, I would take at least that. That's the one that I'll be betting personally. On the bottom side of the day, the last match, Evil Geniuses going up against Splyce. And again, Evil Geniuses finding the win versus 100 Thieves it's a pretty jaw-dropping performance for them, honestly. Beyond expectations, I think, for just about anybody out there. Splyce taking FaZe to game 5. Okay, not bad. Could you do the same here against Evil Geniuses, though? Splyce are the favorites at minus 188. Their minus 1.5 is at plus 137. That's a bait. Don't go for it. Evil Geniuses will be sitting at plus 137 to win, and then a minus 188 to cover 2 maps. Again, nothing there really worth going for, because personally, I've got this one going Splyce's direction, 3-2. Mostly because I think Splyce looked cleaner by the end of the day, and Evil Geniuses started to look a little bit weaker. It really just came down for me that Attach was popping off versus 100 Thieves. You can't guarantee that he's going to have the same kind of performance against Splyce. And honestly, you take a look at the upfront battle, Splyce versus Evil Geniuses, you favor Splyce heavy with Jerd and Huke going up against the SOG combo of Evil Geniuses. Because honestly, Apathy has been playing okay, but is he enough to really dictate going up against either Jerd or potentially Huke? Nah, I don't think so. Attach, yeah, you played well as the flex SOG Maddox role, but honestly, again, I don't see it. And then you take a look at just how everything else will match up in the Maddox line. Again, I just don't see this one going in favor of Evil Geniuses. This one might very well be a 3-1 for Splyce, but I have this one going game 5. I have faith that Revan has coached this team into a position of power and another position of potentially being a major contender, or at least a top 8 contender in the future. So as far as the scorecard goes, here are the bets that I suggest. Parlaying Enigma 6 and Luminosity together for the doubles bet, and then FaZe Clan the plus 1.5 versus 100 Thieves for the spread, or the 2 things that I have for you guys. Again, sorry for this one's been a little bit long. We're gonna have long videos throughout the entire of the week though, so just get ready for it. I'll try to break it down a little bit faster for you guys so we can get through these videos in more timely fashion. If you enjoy this style of video, please make sure you subscribe, and if you could, ring that notification bell to get that little blip of when my videos do pop up live in the top right of your YouTube. I've been Shift, you've been you. That's been the CWL Recap. We'll catch you for day number 2. Until then, hope you keep holding it down. Later. Bye-bye.